Today's date is Thursday, December 1st, 2011. I am Jose Maria Paul Silvestrini, and I am not related to the interviewee. This interview is being conducted for the World War II Veteran History Project, sponsored by the Historical Society of Palm Beach County and Oxbridge Academy of the Palm Beaches. This oral history will be sent for inclusion in the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress. All right. To start us off, would you please spell out your name?
My name is Richard J. Block, B-L-O-C-K.
Okay, thank you. And what is your date of birth?
April 17th, 1926,
For purely legal reasons, what war did you serve in?
World War II.
What branch of the service were you in?
The Air, well, at that time it was called the Air Corps.
Where were you born?
I was born in Far Rockaway, New York.
What did your parents do for a living?
My father owned real estate. My mother was a housekeeper.
Do you have any brothers or sisters?
I have a sister who used to live here in Palm Beach County when she moved from New York. She is now deceased.
Did she do anything for the war?
She did not.
I know that you enlisted. What made you choose to enlist?
Well, it's an interesting story. I got out of high school in late 1943. In those days, the military had what is known as the draft. It was mandatory for all males to register with the military authorities at age 18. And they would give you a number, and based upon a rotary system, your number would be called up as to when you would be put into service, either the Navy, the Air Force, or the Army. While my number was awaiting being drawn up, I matriculated to Ohio State University. I was able to get in one full year of college before I went into the military, and the reason was that the authorities in New York sent my documents to Columbus. When Columbus called me, I said, "This is not my permanent address." They said, "Well, you have to be drafted out of your permanent address," so they sent my papers back to New York. And because of this mix-up in paperwork, I was able to get one full year of college in. Just before they drafted me, I decided I did not want to be in the infantry, so I enlisted in the Air Corps.
That's nice. And how old were you when you enlisted?
Oh, I was probably 19, just around there.
And why did you choose the Air Corps instead of the infantry?
Just sounded better. I didn't want to be in the Navy. Didn't want to be out on the ship, and as far as the infantry is concerned, it just didn't appeal to me.
What did your parents think about you going into the military?
Well, like all parents, they were very apprehensive, especially if you're an only son. Parents don't like to lose a child. We were losing a lot of people at that time, and 43 and 44, late 1944 was the Battle of the Bulge, so they were not too happy. Then again, I was sort of a cantankerous or thinking teenager, and I was saying, why does somebody have the right to take 2 years out of my life when I haven't agreed to it? Because it was mandatory, not as it is now, which is a volunteer military, completely different.
And you said that you enlisted after the Battle of the Bulge. Can you tell us some
Well,
of your
no, I
thoughts
didn't
about
say I
it?
enlisted after the Battle of the Bulge. I said that in late 1944, that was about the time of the Battle of the Bulge. So obviously, any parent who had a child going to the service with the severe headlines that we had in all of the newspapers then, we did not have television then, just made you very, very unhappy that your child was going into that type of situation.
And what sort of training did you have to do before you were shipped off?
Well, I received a lot of training, almost a full year's worth. I was inducted into the Air Corps at Fort Dix, New Jersey. They sent me by train to Biloxi, Mississippi, which is now sort of a gambling capital, but in those days was just a beach and the Biloxi Army Air Force Base. And you've got map training, and you've got some gunnery training and other things. And after a month or two, and of course that was basic training, so you got a lot of physical activity to get you in shape, so to speak. and they did a lot of testing to see if you qualified for pilot, bombardier, radar technician, whatever. And I was sent from there to Truax Field, Madison, Wisconsin, off the campus of Wisconsin University, to train to be a radar technician. The Army did strange things, the Air Force did strange things. These hands can't change a light bulb, but they thought I had some talent to become a radar technician. Where they saw that, I still don't know. From there, I went to Chanute Field, Illinois, off the campus of the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana, Illinois. And incidentally, when I was at Truax Field in Madison, Wisconsin, in the typical military way, it was in the middle of the winter time. It was freezing cold. They'd get us up at 2 in the morning. You'd have an hour to get dressed and go for breakfast, and classes started at 3 a.m. When I got down from Champaign, the next stop, Champaign, Illinois, that was Chanute Field. From there, they sent me to a place called Boca Raton Army Air Force Base, Florida, USA. But when was that? That was July and August. So in the middle of the winter, I'm in Wisconsin. In the middle of the summer, I'm in Boca Raton, Florida. And from there, I got overseas, and I was the first Air Force replacement troops after the war in Europe was over. I got to Europe in either the last week of May or first week of June, something like that. The war in Europe was over in early May of 1945. So you're not going to get any bloody battle stories from me, because I didn't see battle stories, but I saw the devastation, what was left after these battles that we went through.
What sort of things did you see as you were coming in?
From where?
From the States to Europe.
Well, my wife says I'm not allowed to tell you of my first sight, but I'm going to tell it to you anyway, okay? I'm at Langley Field, Virginia. I get on a troop ship. We're going overseas. I had never been on a large boat, and the Liberty ships were not large by today's cruise ship standards. They were really small ships, you know, maybe 2,000 to 3,000 people mashed together on the boat. And we go overseas, and as we get into the English Channel, we get caught in a hurricane for 2 days, and we're bouncing around like a cork, and everybody is sick except me. For some reason or other, I didn't get seasick or whatever, but you know, the stench was bad because there's no portholes open or windows open or anything like that. And I would go down into the to what was the kitchen and grab an apple and just suck the juice out of the apple. And other than that, I just stayed as calm as I could. And all of a sudden, I hear some commotion a couple of decks up on the ship, and I go up to see what it is, and of course, you can't get onto the deck because we're in the middle of a hurricane. And what it was somebody who needed immediate surgery, and this was too small a ship to give him immediate surgery. So they shot a line across to a much larger ship, put him in a gurney, and sent him across on that line, tied in, of course. And I was able to look at that through a porthole. And as they get to the other side, to the other ship, the gurney is going up like this, and he's starting to slide out like this. And they grab him just before he slides out of the gurney. It's something that's as vivid in my mind today as it was the day it happened. We finally land in Le Havre, France. They put us on a train. Now, because the war had just been over, barely a month, they were still concerned about people who disliked Americans, more than that, maybe hated American soldiers. So all of the drapes or window treatments in the trains were completely shut down, and you couldn't look out. And all of a sudden, as we're riding along for a couple of hours, train stops. And I look at my watch, and it's like 6 a.m. in the morning. And I want to peek out. And I do peek out. And my wife said, I'm not allowed to tell you this story, but I'm going to tell it to you anyway. The very first thing I see of France is an old peasant woman squatting near the train, peeing. So that's my first impression of France. Okay? The train continues on and takes us. I'm sorry. You asked me to come here. I'm going to tell it as it was. At any rate, they take us to Wiesbaden, Germany, which was the Army Air Corps distribution center where they were sending various people. Next morning, man calls my name and he says, Block, what's your number? 151-22283. Every soldier, regardless of where he was and what branch, he had a number. And that number sticks with you like your Social Security number. You never forget it. Block, you had some training of ROTC in college? Yeah, a couple of months. He said, okay, you go down to the motor pool and you get a weapons carrier, which is an open truck, and there's 6 guys and you are going to have a driver, and he's going to take you to Linz, Austria. I don't know where Austria is, and I certainly don't know where Linz is. I mean, I'm now in Germany, and we passed through France, as I said to you. So we're driving along, and it's like a 12-hour drive. As we're driving through, hard for you people to understand, but there are no malls, there are no shopping centers, there are no strip stores. These are dirt roads going through farm areas and rural areas, and no place to get anything. A couple hours into the trip, the guys start saying, get us something to drink. We need something to drink. Get us something, water, a Coke, anything. Well, we're going to get some. Finally, I tell the driver, pull over to the next farmhouse. Pull over, guy comes out, he's speaking German, we're speaking English. A little bit of a problem. We need something to drink, something. No. We have nothing. We have nothing. We need something to drink. Oh, okay. He comes out with a stein, which is a long, tall mug that they used to drink beer in, but in this case he's got potato schnapps, which we find out later is something like 140 proof. Now that's very, very intoxicating, and you can get very, very drunk on that. So, as we're driving along, these are bumpy roads with potholes in them. They're not paved roads, they're dirt roads primarily. These guys are all taking a sip of this potato schnapps. I never take a single sip. All I do is I keep my hand underneath the mug. My hand gets wet, I lick it off. And this goes on for a couple of hours. We finally get to Hoersking Army Air Force Base outside of Linz, Austria. And the driver's about to pull into the gate. And I said, what are you doing? He said, well, we're here. I said, you go a mile past the main gate, you pull off to the side, and you wait till we're all sober or we'll all end up in jail. And that takes me to Hoersking Army Air Force Base in Linz, Austria. Next question is yours.
Lovely. Backtracking a little bit,
Okay.
you said that they
Did
were...
you remember any of that?
Yeah.
Okay.
You went through a trip, you went on to Canal, you went on a train, they told you then to move to Austria.
Right.
You went with your men,
Right.
you
I'm
you
just
accidentally
kidding.
got drunk off
Go
of
ahead.
potato. But backtracking a little bit, wow, you were saying that they give you different tests to see what part of the Air Force you should be in. What sort of tests did they give you?
Well, they were actually, I guess the only way I can describe it is either technical or psychological tests. Some of them were written. There was one test, and I guess it had to do with dexterity or how quickly you can adjust to something. It's funny how certain things stay in your mind. Of all the tests they gave us over a couple of days, the only test I remember is a silver disc, looked like an old recording disc that you guys don't know anything about, but he does. Anyway, and it had, you held a pencil or a needle to it, and there were dots on it, and you had earphones on, and they told you, touch the pink dot or touch the white dot. They wanted to see how quickly you could get to it, and that sort of told them how quickly you could adjust to things and how the dexterity of your dexterity abilities were. I guess that was very important to flying. I don't know. But that's the only test I remember, aside from written tests, and I certainly don't remember the questions of the written test.
And you've mentioned your wife a few times. Were you married before you enlisted?
No. As a matter of fact, I didn't get married till I was age 29. The mother of my 3 daughters passed away in '93. My present wife lost her husband sometime in '93, and my original wife's best friend knew my present wife from Westchester, New York, from years before, introduced us a year later, and we've been together and married since 1994. And between us, we have 12 grandchildren,
That's nice.
which we're proud of.
And after you guys sobered up, what'd you do in Austria?
Very interesting you should say that. Very funny, these questions. I'll give you some history, okay? I played basketball for the Air Force. Each Air Force base in Europe had their own team. And we would go from base to base and play the other Air Force teams, and they'd have challenges and whatever. And our base commander used to say to us, if you can win this tournament, I'm going to give you a 3-day pass. And one time we won one of the tournaments, and he sent us, and I have a picture of us on a lake, and he sent us for a 3-day pass vacation to the home of Alfred Rosenberg. This was his summer home. Alfred Rosenberg was one of Hitler's cabinet members. He was the one who was sort of the philosopher and interpreted what the Nazis were trying to do and what they believed in, etc. And so we would go to this beautiful Tyrolean home on this lake. It had a motorboat and whatever, and we were there for 3 days. It was like a little mini vacation, so to speak.
Interesting. Was Alfred Rosenberg the gentleman who said, if you say a lie enough times, people will think it's the truth?
I don't know if it was he who made up that or if it was Goebbels, because Goebbels was the PR person who controlled all of the media for Hitler, you know, whether it was printed media or radio media, no television.
And you said that you played in the basketball team. Did you do that during high school, and did you continue after the war?
No, I played, you know, JV type basketball in high school, and I wasn't at Ohio State long enough to play for them, and certainly not good enough to play in the college. But it was different in the Air Force. You know, they had baseball teams and basketball teams and track teams and anything so that you get some relief from the Army routine, so to speak.
Speaking of which, how did you adapt to the military lifestyle?
Well, I think I adapted fairly well, except that I remember telling my parents that I don't think it's fair or right for somebody to tell somebody else that you have to take 2 years or 5 years, and many people serve 5 years, out of your life and do what I'm telling you to do. Because in those days, and it's something I think that young people should think about. In those days, the military was a draft. It was mandatory. You had to sign up at 18, and they would call you and tell you where to go and whatever. Nowadays, the military is all volunteer. And as you probably know, most of the military today, right or wrong, and as great a job as they're doing, most of the military come from families that don't have the wherewithal to send their children to college or this and that. So a lot of people join the military today, I believe, to get what education they can get out of it, and they do get some education, etc. And it was one of the things that I discussed with Tony when he asked me if I would do this interview, and I said to him, I would like to tell these young people that one of the things they should think about, one of the things these young people should think about is it a good idea to have mandatory service to the government, either state or federal, in this country for 18 months? You want to be a nurse, as an example, and they get you a job doing volunteer work in a hospital, And for that 18 months, they pay for your 4-year education to become a nurse. Is that a good thing? Or would you rather just leave everything voluntary? It doesn't have to be, if it's a mandatory thing, it doesn't have to be that you're going into the military. If you want to be a teacher, you can be help assistant teachers, but we know that all of the public education systems in this country are short on money, and they need as much help as they can get. If they can get help from seniors in high school for a year and a half after they graduate high school, and then for that they pay for your education to go to the University of Florida or Florida State or wherever, is that a good thing? Is that something that you as young people should think about and try to change? I'm not telling you what to do, I'm just telling you that there's a choice.
Do you think it's a good option? Because you said that, is it right for people to take a few years out of your life and tell you what to do?
Well, as a young person, that's how I felt. How I feel now is completely different. I'm going to make a statement to you. As I think I told you, between my wife and I, we have 12 grandchildren, and they range in age from 3 or 4 years to 30 years. So I've got people getting out of college, people out of college, people in high school, people in junior high school, people in grade school, etc. So I think I have a pretty good feeling as to how young people are growing up in this country. And do you know who Tom Brokaw is? Tom Brokaw is one of the NBC commentators. He was the NBC nightly news commentator or editor for many years, and he's still alive, and he does documentaries, and he's written books, and he has said that my generation is the greatest generation. And I'm one of the older people who feel that your generation is so bright as a group. Not everybody is a genius, but as a group is so bright and has so much intelligence that you can be a greater generation than we were. You just need to be focused on things that you want to accomplish. And I don't know what that is. Do you want to accomplish landing people in Mars? Do you want to be more concerned about how we're ruining the environment, if we're ruining the environment? Do you want to figure out how not to have homeless people? I don't know what the focus should be. Maybe it should be on many things. But I happen to have a lot of confidence in young people today. And I think they can be a greater generation than we were, and we were a great generation. Tom Brokaw was right.
Do you think that we should have, as a society, goals like, to get a man on the moon, or to get a man on Mars, or to fix global warming? Do you think
Sure I do. And, a lot of people say, well, look at what a waste of money it is. Well, was it a waste of money? Do we all like our television? Do we like our internet? Do we like all of the things that cell phones can do nowadays? How did that happen? That all happened through NASA. Because in order to get rockets up, we had to miniaturize everything. And science had to work and work and work. And they did. And they're improving our lives every day, from the type of clothing we wear, which doesn't itch, which when I was a kid, you wore clothing that itched you like crazy. Lighter clothing that's warmer than the clothing we wore 50 years ago, but much lighter. All kinds of things. So the answer to the question is, young people have to be focused. Young people have to look at this country in particular. This is one great country. One of the negatives that I find about the electronic age that we're in is that money is a great force. And I know that bad news sells television time and newspapers and things like that. But we've got to concentrate on the good things, and we've got to publicize the good things of this country. And I hope you guys look at it that way, because this is one fantastic country with a lot in our future. Don't let them talk us down, because it's not so. We will overcome everything. Are we going through hard times now? Sure. The pendulum always swings both ways. You can't have everything good all the time. And we will come out of this and we'll be stronger and better than ever, and we will help each other. Those who have something will help those who do not have something.
And you said that money is it is a big deciding factor in our modern age. Was it like that when Boca Raton, when you were here in 1944?
Well, it probably was, but fortunately or unfortunately, as a young person, I didn't realize it because I came from a reasonably comfortable family. I didn't come from a very wealthy family, but in those days, if you had a car, that was a big deal. I mean, during the Depression, my father had a Cadillac. I mean, that was a big deal. But look at the other side. He had a chauffeur. Why did he have a chauffeur? Because he was wealthy? No, because it was a Depression. And during the Depression, you could get a chauffeur or a man to help you around the house or something. All you had to do was give him food. You didn't even have to pay him. And if you gave him a room to live in and food, he was working for you 24 hours a day, maybe without a salary or a very small salary. So things are not always the way you look at them immediately. There are other circumstances that come into play.
Did any such events occur while you were in the military? Things that you thought were one thing that you later learned were another?
Did other things? Well, I'm not sure I understand the question. Nothing that I can think of other than being in the military was a completely different experience than living home with your parents. Your parents let you do certain things. If you're doing something they don't like, they tell you don't do this, they punish you, or whatever. The military is not that way at all. The military, everybody en masse is doing the same thing in a timely manner in the way your superiors tell you to do it. And that's it. It's not, Mom, I don't want to do this today. Or, Dad, why are you screaming at me? You don't have anything to say. So from that point of being disciplined in an orderly manner with a purpose to that discipline, meaning to get you to move as part of a group to do whatever it is they want you to do, I think not military training necessarily, but training by the government is a good thing. It will help other people, and it will give you a purpose in life that maybe you don't get from your parents, because it's different.
Speaking about training, you mentioned that you had done basic training and that they were doing something with radar training for you, correct? What other advanced training did you receive?
I didn't, other than the radar training and what they called advanced radar, which was at Chanute Field, Illinois, I didn't receive any other training. I shot a gun in gunnery training at Kessler Field in Biloxi, Mississippi. I had never shot a gun before that, and I have never shot a gun since then. And I have no desire to shoot a gun.
You received a few medals, including good conduct in sharpshooter. How did you receive the sharpshooter award?
Well, in those days, I have a picture of it. In those days, if you were taking a gunnery class and you hit 90% of your shots into the bullseye or whatever the criteria was at the time, you automatically were entitled to a medal. And good conduct is good conduct. I mean, if your superior sergeant or lieutenant recommended you because he felt you deserved it, then you got a good conduct.
And the rest of the medals, did you?
I didn't have any other medals that I can recall. Because as I told you before, I was not in the active fighting part of this war. I was actually in the first replacement troops for the Air Corps after the war in Europe was over.
And I know that you visited concentration camps. Could you tell us about your experiences with those?
Yeah, it wasn't very pleasant. I received, I think, 2 furloughs in the 9 or 10 months that I was overseas. One furlough I went to Switzerland, which was kind of eye-opening because I was used to the subways in New York, and which were old and noisy and whatever. And the train system in Switzerland at the time was similar to what we would think of today as the bullet trains. They were very fast, very clean. I remember that standing 2 to 3 feet back on the platform was a yellow line, and signs all over the place, stand back from the yellow line, because those trains came in fast and just slowed down. And I liked Switzerland as a very clean country, whatever. Another furlough that I took, I went to, I believe it was Poland, and I went to Dachau, which was a concentration camp. Now, by the time I got there, I did not see any bones. I didn't see any deep graves with bodies in it or anything like that. They had a lot of the stuff cleaned up, except for one thing. They let you walk through what were the crematoriums. And the crematoriums were a room maybe this size, maybe a little bit bigger, with ceilings about this height, but all concrete, not painted or anything like that. And I remember distinctly, I can see it as if I was walking through it today. I'd walked into that room, there's a couple other guys with me, and we're looking like this, and I go like that, and I see blood stains on the ceiling. And that can be very, very moving if you know the history of what was going on, and which I did at the time. Everybody did, you know, that the Nazis had burned so many Jewish people as well as non-Jewish people, so that was not a pleasant experience.
Was your experience around Switzerland more pleasant?
Yeah, Switzerland was, as you probably know, a neutral country. Very clean. Most people in Switzerland spoke at least 2, maybe 3 languages, because part of Switzerland speaks German, part speaks French, and a lot of people spoke English, so yes, it was very pleasant.
Could you tell us about some of the friendships you made in the service?
Well, I'm not in touch with anybody that, you know, that I was actually in the service with. I remember being friendly with 2 guys from Peoria, Illinois, that we played basketball together with, and I think I have some pictures of them. I'm not sure if they're in the pictures or not. And really, that would be about it. I don't have anything that's memorable.
So, did you ever have the chance to meet General Patton?
I did not.
And what was it like? What sort of things did you do when you weren't on duty? Besides, you know, when you went to Rosenberg's beach house?
Well, I'll tell you a different story that's kind of funny that I think you can relate to. I came from New York. New York, children your age, my age, at that time, did not have cars. Everybody used the subway, walked, or took a bus. I get overseas, I'm at Hoersking Air Base outside of Linz, Austria, and one night they call me and they say, I think I was a sergeant at the time, Sergeant Block, you're going to be on guard duty tonight. I said, what do you mean I'm going to be on guard duty? Well, every once in a while you pull guard duty or you pull a KP, which is kitchen duty or whatever. So I'm on guard duty. Yeah, what do? You get down to the motor pool, and you get a Jeep, and you drive to the end of the airstrip, and you'll have a gun with you, which you get when you get the Jeep, and you just stay there and keep your eyes open, and there's no walkie-talkies and not anything, and let us, you know, if you see anything strange, you let us know. Now, I'm young, and I'm embarrassed to tell them I don't know how to drive a Jeep. I've never driven a car. Now, that could be a problem. So I get down to the motor pool. He says, okay, here are the keys. Take that Jeep over there. What do you mean take that Jeep over there? I don't know how to drive a car. So, and we have to remember, in those days, every car was a shift car. There was no automatic shift. I put the key in. Somehow I managed to jerk it back, jerk it forward. Somehow I'd start to get moving. And as I told my grandchildren, I don't know how many circles and figure eights I did going down that runway, But I finally got to the end of the runway without killing anybody, including myself. And that's the first time I had ever driven a car. What's your next question?
That's nice. Well, since you were in Europe after Germany had surrendered,
Yes.
What were you doing when you heard about Hiroshima and Nagasaki?
Let me see where I was at the time. That was in August or July of '45, right? Yeah. So I think that I had just returned from Europe, and I believe that I was taking a course at Columbia University because, as I told you, I was born in Far Rockaway. We moved to Manhattan when our house burnt down when I was 5 years old. And I lived in Manhattan, on the west side of Manhattan, about 10 blocks south of Columbia University. And I think I took 2 classes and gained 6 college credits during those 6 or 8 weeks when I got out of the service and ran to Columbia. And then I had those credits transferred to Ohio State and went back to Ohio State in September of '45. So I think that's where I was at the time of the atomic bombs being dropped.
And what was your reaction when you heard the news?
Well, it was different than my reaction would have been today because there was no visuals. I mean, there was no television. You couldn't see that on television. You saw it on the newsreel. If you go to a movie in those days, if you went to a movie, they would not only show the coming attractions, but they'd show the movie. And if it was a Saturday afternoon, they gave out dishes or coffee cups or something, anything to, additional things to get you into to see a movie. And they also had what they called newsreels, and they would show you what was going on in the war, or if somebody of prominence passed away or got married. All that was on the newsreel for 10 minutes or so between the 2 pictures that they would show you for the same money. So my guess is that's where I saw the visual. Yes, I heard about it on the radio because everybody was listening to radios in those days, but it was very hard to comprehend the impact of those 2 atomic bombs. Very, very difficult. I mean, you couldn't visualize in your own mind, 300,000 people being killed with 1 bomb or whatever. And certainly you couldn't understand what the years of radiation caused, going out 5, 10, 15, 20 years. I mean, even the grandchildren of some of those people who survived Nagasaki had problems. So, very, very difficult. Now, everything is instantaneous. If we're at a war in Iraq or Afghanistan, you're almost there with them because you see everything. It's amazing. I don't know if it's good or bad, but it's amazing.
And you said that on the newsreels they talked about, people of prominence. Did you hear about the FDR through that, or?
Well, I know exactly where I was when FDR passed away. I was at Chanute Field, Illinois, and I heard about it, late morning, as I recall. I don't know if I was on my way someplace or whatever, but that's where I was.
And what was your reaction to his death?
Well, again, when you're 18, 19, you're not necessarily a political animal. You're not Democrat or Republican or Independent. You're not thinking that way at that age normally, especially in those days. But you knew that he was our president. You knew that he was a very prominent figure leading our country, the only president ever elected 4 times, the only president ever elected more than twice. A very powerful influence on our country, not only in those days, but in many instances all of the time leading up to today. Some of the things that he had to do to get us out of the Depression, and not only that, but to add to the enjoyment of our life, happened during his administrations. I'm thinking particularly of the national parks.
Backtracking a little bit, how did you return back to the States? Like, did you return by boat, or?
Yeah, it was a troop ship. You had to come back with the service that you were in my case, the Air Corps. They brought you back. You had to get discharged. And to get discharged, they gave, you know, if you're a good citizen, so to speak, in the service, they gave you an honorable discharge. If not, there was a dishonorable discharge, and I think they had one other type of discharge in between. You're allowed to take, as I recall, a blanket and 2 sets of clothing with you. And I think they gave you, I'm almost positive they gave us a check, or you got a check in the mail a couple of weeks later or something for your last pay and whatever.
And on the way, did you experience another hurricane, or was it just calm sailing?
Calm sailing coming back.
That's nice. And how did you adjust to civilian life?
Well, in my case, it was easy because, as I said, I went back to my parents' apartment on 106th and Broadway in Manhattan, on the west side of Manhattan, 10 blocks south of Columbia. I immediately knew that I wanted to start my education again. So within a day or two, I ran up to Columbia, saw when classes started. They were starting in another week or so, because I think I got out of the service in May or June of '45. And the summer classes were 6 weeks, and I was able to get into 2 summer classes. I took 2 political science courses, got 6 hours, 6 credit hours, 3 for each one, transferred those to Ohio State, and started Ohio State in September, again, as a sophomore.
And how do you think your experiences in the war, altered your experience? Because I know that seeing the lady urinating was very traumatizing, I'm sure.
Say that again?
How did your experiences in the war, affect your life back home?
Well, I'll tell it to you this way. My freshman year at Ohio State, I played a lot of basketball. I did a lot of drinking to excess. I had a C to C minus average. I come back from the war. I go to Columbia for the 2 courses. I get 2 A's. I finish Ohio State getting B pluses, A minuses, A's, and ended up with like a 3.4, 3.5 grade point average. So I think I matured a little bit.
That's nice.
I realized that drinking was stupid, okay? And the reason, and sometimes if somebody says to you, don't put your finger on that hot oven, you don't believe it. It's going to burn your finger. Don't do it. But, we're all growing up and we're learning, so we go like that and we burn our fingers. Well, drinking is the same thing. When we were in the service, especially we were in Germany, the PX, which was the little 7-Eleven, so to speak, where you can go in and get a sandwich and this and that, and it was very, very inexpensive. You get a beer for a nickel. You could get scotch for 25 cents. So obviously everybody just drink, we're young and we're foolish and whatever, and you have free time off. You don't have your mom and your dad telling you don't do this, do that, and you don't have your sergeant or your lieutenant over you either. It's your free time. So you're doing things to excess. And as I remember the good things, I also remember throwing up. I remember dry heaves. It wasn't a pleasant experience. But I had to do it 2 or 3 or 5 times, whatever I did, until something hit me in the head. Hey, this is stupid. And when I got back to Ohio State, I didn't do any drinking. I joined the fraternity and everything, but I didn't do any drinking, and I still don't drink. I mean, I might have a sip of wine once in a while, but when I see people drinking to excess, I realize those people are crazy, including my grandchildren. Next. Uh-oh, he's going to throw me a curve here.
What fraternity were you?
Tau Epsilon Phi.
And for those who don't know, could you explain us a little bit more about what your fraternity was about?
This is about the war. This is not about my college days.
Wow.
Okay, but I'll be happy to answer. What do you want to know about my fraternity?
Anything you'd like us to know?
Well, I found it. I was one of two children. My sister was about 9 years older than I was. So basically, as a boy, I was, kind of a loner because I didn't have another brother to talk to, and my sister was a little bit too much older than I was for me to talk and converse and kid around with her. So for me, it was a very good experience joining a fraternity, having fun with the guys, going to classes with guys and stuff like that. So for me, it was a very good experience, and I enjoyed it. And of course, we had intramural type activities, and we were pretty good athletically. We had a very good softball team. We had a very good basketball team, and things like that. So I enjoyed it.
And is there anything you'd like people to know about this period of history, besides what we've already discussed?
Well, the only thing I would like people to know is, and I think historians are correct, those that I've heard of and read about. World War II was a popular war. People had heard about what was going on in Germany. They knew that Germany had taken over Austria and Czechoslovakia and Belgium and France, and we were very much concerned about it, even though when you go back to the late 1920s into the early 1930s, the United States in many ways was detached from Europe. We felt we had the big ocean between us. There was no such thing as intercontinental airplanes or anything like that. So we were detached from those type of wars and things like that. But of course, as we got into the 40s, things changed, and we started to realize that what happens in Europe could affect us, and it did, and etc. And now, of course, if you fast forward to today, we all realize that this one Earth belongs to all of us, and what happens in Chernobyl in Russia has an effect on us. What happens on Three Island in the Pacific, in Pittsburgh, has an effect on other people. I'm talking about atomic energy problems. And we certainly know, if we read television, if we watch television or read the newspapers today, we know that economic times in Europe or China or wherever have an effect on the United States and vice versa. So we are one world, and we've got to learn to get along with everybody. And I think one of the ways of getting along does not necessarily mean that we have to go and police every country in the world that we don't agree with, because we can't afford to do that, and it's hurting us. So your generation is going to have to be smart enough to figure out what this present generation is not smart enough to do. Where we go into other countries because we want to protect our oil interests or we want to protect other interests, we have to figure out a way how we can talk to people and convince them that either we're right, they're right, or somewhere in the middle is right, but without doing it with force, because we cannot sustain the type of monies we're spending on force in this country. And it's going to affect your children and your grandchildren if we don't get a hold of it, so to speak.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, but I'm really happy that you guys invited me, and I hope I've given you the type of answers that will help you. And as I said once before, and I'll repeat it, Tom Brokaw said that we are the greatest generation. I believe you can be a much greater generation. You guys are much smarter than we were, age for age. You've got more information available to you immediately. Take advantage of it. Look at your neighbor. Help your neighbor. You're not isolated as a community, you're not isolated as a family, you're not isolated as a country. We're all together in this. And it's becoming more and more evident every single day. That's it.
Well,
How many
actually,
years? You have a question? Huh?
Oh, yeah, I got several questions here.
Oh my God, now you're going to start, okay.
Did you serve with any African-American troops when you were in the
I
military?
did not, because you will recall that there was no integration of the troops at the time until Truman took over, and then he allowed African Americans to form their own units, but it still was not integrated.
What was the food like when you were in the military?
Well, every good soldier complains about the food, and rightly so. Okay.
I know, did you receive any rations while you were there, or was it like sort of cafeteria style?
Well, it was basically if you're at a base, you know, whether you're at Kessler Field or Boca Raton on the Air Force Base, there was a mess hall. And certain squadrons went to mess at different times depending upon what classes they had and what other training things they had. If you were traveling, like I told you, we traveled 12 hours or whatever it was from Wiesbaden to Linz, Austria, 8 hours, whatever it was. Sure, you could pick up some K rations or whatever to take with you, and K rations were basically canned goods that you just pull the top off and you either liked it or you didn't like it. If you were hungry enough, you ate it.
So at Boca Raton Army Airfield, how secret was the training?
The training was not that secret. Did I tell you the story about the hurricane? Oh, I didn't tell them that. Okay.
I think.
I'm glad you asked that question. Okay. So I'm stationed at Boca Raton Army Air Force Base, which is now the site of Florida Atlantic University, including their new football stadium, which opened this year. The barracks were made of 2x4s and very lightweight drywall covered with sort of a tar paper, a very heavy tar paper to keep the rain out, and very, very flimsy. Here comes a hurricane a couple of days after we arrived there. And they tell us, look, you can take your sleeping bags and go to one barrack, the first one that was ever built, out of concrete block. And it's safe to be there in the hurricane, etc., etc. But of course, we don't know where you're going to get food or anything like that. Take some K rations with you, take your sleeping bags, make yourself comfortable. If you don't want to do that, we'll put you on a bus down to Miami Beach, where every hotel in Miami Beach has been taken over by either the Air Force, the Army, the Navy, whatever. So everybody, of course, said, well, okay, put me on the bus. And go down. There's no Florida Turnpike or anything like that. It's Route 1 and just plodding along until you get there, whatever hours it took. So they take us to a little hotel called the Haddon Hall. Now, the Haddon Hall is still there. It's a 3-story hotel. And it's around 17th or 18th Street and Collins Avenue. It was diagonally across the street from the Shelburne, which the Shelburne Hotel was the last and newest hotel built in Miami Beach before the war. And we get there and it's raining like crazy and whatever. And they put us in a room. And the hotel was really interesting because you had to walk 2 or 3 steps up to get to the entrance, then 2 or 3 or 4 steps more to get into the lobby. And then there was an elevator to it was a 3-story hotel, up or a stairway up. Get up to our rooms, next and we fall asleep, we're tired, we get up the next morning and it's raining like crazy, and windy like crazy. So, and the elevator's not working. So let's walk down toward the lobby to see what's going on. Now remember I told you there's a total of maybe 7 steps, 2 separate 3-story steps or 2 steps up. We get halfway down the steps and we start to see the lobby and all the furniture is floating. So we can't get into the lobby. Now what you guys don't know, and this is how life changes because of certain circumstances, but maybe our instructor will remember this. Gas stations used to have signs, whether it's Shell or Esso or whoever it is, They were tin signs. They were on a post with a bar, and the tin sign used to go back and forth like that if it got windy. Well, those tin signs were pulled off their masts and were flying down Collins Avenue like frisbees. Now, if you know anything about hurricanes, you know that a hose, a simple garden hose, lifted up by a hurricane and flying through the air can cut through concrete block like that, like it's butter. This is a thin metal sign flying like a frisbee. So it was very dangerous. Within a year after the hurricane is over, they started to change the signage laws, and now, of course, you see them, we're catching up, and yeah, it's 40 years later because it takes every municipality and every county, you know, time to change their laws and this and that, but now you see all of the street lights on fixed poles and not on wires with the lights floating back and forth, and that was part of the reason, that hurricane. And you have another question, sir?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Did you use the GI Bill
I
to go to
did.
college?
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's another thing when I was talking to these young folks about mandatory service to our government. The government is very generous. If you served in the service during World War II, they said to you, would you like to go to college? Yeah, I'd like to go to college. Whatever you wanted to do. You didn't have to have grades, you didn't have to do anything. You just had to put in a certain amount of time in the service, whether it's 6 months or 6 years, it didn't make any difference. You were entitled to sign up for the GI Bill of Rights, which paid for your college education. Now, isn't that a good thing? Don't you think that would be a good thing to happen today? Because we have so many people who can't afford to send children to college, and we know that we need engineers, we need nurses, we need doctors, we need all of the highly technical, skilled people to take us into the rest of this century and beyond. So we have to encourage people to go. If they can't afford it, we have to send them. We don't have to send them for free. We'll pay for their education, but they've got to give us 18 months of work, either before the college education or after, whichever is appropriate for whatever particular, science they want to study.
Actually,
You're not going to tell Lori about this whole interview,
No.
are you?
What was your interaction with the locals like when you were overseas?
Well, again, you bring up I'm Jewish, and I'm overseas where, in Austria in particular, where Hitler was born, they were extremely anti-Semitic. It's the only way to put it. I didn't have any incidents. They're speaking German, and I'm speaking English. I'm with my buddies and this and that. Christmas Eve, 1944. We go out to a little pub or bar or whatever you want to call it, and it was like a postcard. Snowflakes are coming down in this little Tyrolean town, all Tyrolean architecture. Snow on the roofs, 6 or 8 inches high, and the snow is coming down in very soft, big flakes. And we get into this bar, and there's some girls there, some German guys there, there are Army guys there, and we're sitting there, a whole group of us, and one of the girls said something in German, which I don't understand German except for one word, something about Jud, Jewish. And I said to somebody sitting next to her, what did she say? She said something about the Jews were the cause of all this. It's the only time I've hit a woman. I was a good tennis player, so I hit her with a backhand across her face. I'm not proud of that, but I can picture it. And you asked me the question, and I'm going to tell it to you as it was.
Great, thank you.
I actually have another question. You talked about a few of your rather interesting moments in the military. What was the absolute funniest thing that happened to you during?
Well, the funniest thing was when I landed in France. I told you that right at the beginning. And I looked out the window, and there's this peasant woman peeing on the ground. Don't you think that's funny?
That is hilarious.
Story, yeah.
That's hilarious.